Most of your favorite games were probably made by large studios. These teams can contain numerous people who are able to pull their programming, art, and musical talents together. But sometimes, all it takes is one individual who's daring enough to tackle it all. Across the span of 5 years, a Japanese software developer who goes by Pixel continually developed Cave Story during his spare time, and eventually released it as freeware in December of 2004. Cave Story was my first exposure to the world of indie games, and it was truly something I'd never seen before. Growing up, I had always wanted to make games, but in the back of my head, it always seemed like such a pipe dream. Having to learn code, create art, and produce music seemed like such a daunting task. Playing the game and experiencing one person's vision brought to life was awe-inspiring. The game was definitely ahead of its time, and I think there's a lot of lessons and inspiration aspiring game developers can take away from this work. Mechanically, Cave Story is a Metroidvania-style platformer. You play as a robot named Quote and explore your way through dungeon-like maps, shooting enemies, solving puzzles, and learning more about the world as you advance the plot. The intuitive platforming and shooting will feel right at home to any player even slightly familiar with 2D games, making the game easy to pick up and play. This movement is complemented by a great camera system that slowly pans with the player, always giving a nice field of view. Although such a subtle aspect, the smoothness of the camera is a huge asset as it never feels like the game is fighting against you. Combat-wise, there's a variety of weapons you can obtain, each of which have their own uses and can be incredibly effective in certain situations. This also leads to the game's more unique feature, the weapon level up system. Collecting crystals from fallen enemies will accumulate into weapon-specific level ups, which improve the range and power of your current weapon. Taking damage can potentially level down your weapon back into its original state. This feature offers an interesting reward/punishment system. Players who are playing well will feel even more empowered with upgraded weapons at their disposal. On the other hand, struggling players are essentially backed into a corner, as weakened weapons will make enemies and bosses even more difficult to defeat. Although it may sound counterintuitive, I'd argue it helps make enemy and boss encounters much more tense and dynamic. Weapon power not being permanent helps keep even the best players on their toes, while less experienced players will be incentivized to learn the combat and pick up on enemy behaviors as they attempt to recollect their lost crystals. Switching out a weapon that has been leveled down mid-fight is also a valid strategy, so the level system encourages experimentation and variety in combat. What might go unnoticed is how much of this information is conveyed without the use of tutorials. Instead, the maps are structured in a way so that new gameplay features can be subtly introduced. Levels can then create more distinctive platforming challenges and enemy variety to help keep the gameplay interesting. Combined with superb level design, progression feels incredibly natural to the player in Cave Story. Exploration is heavily incentivized through secret items and power-ups that are scattered throughout each map. This adds to the game's replayability, as it is unlikely the player will find all of these their first time through. Replayability is also heightened through the game's story. The outcome of the ending can be influenced by decisions the player makes, and some of these decisions may not seem obvious to a first-time player. Aesthetically, Cave Story showcases beautiful retro-inspired pixel art that takes inspiration from classic games such as Super Mario, Mega Man, and Metroid. The character designs are some of the best I've seen for a game in this style. Each character has unique assets and quirks to the design, and every pixel is greatly utilized to add to their personality. There's also a lot of thought into how the gameplay and artwork mesh together. Character sprites are bright and easy to see in maps that tend to utilize darker palettes. The shaking and particle effects added when shooting enemies make the combat incredibly satisfying as well. The maps themselves are all aesthetically diverse and differentiable, fitting the mood that their specific environments are trying to convey. The pace of the maps lines up great with the narrative, which I won't detail in the hopes of avoiding too many spoilers. Tiny little details fill the world of Cave Story. The amount of work it must have taken to add and draw so many unique sprites seems painstaking, but it definitely paid off. Although some sprites see little mechanical use, they still aid in the world building and make Cave Story feel alive. Cave Story's score is one of my all-time favorites. Atmospherically, the tracks really sell the feel of the world and the tone that the game is going for. Each of them help in eliciting an emotion that the game wants you to feel, whether that be comfort, tension, melancholy, optimism, etc. The songs are also just incredibly well composed and wonderful to listen to. If you're a fan of chiptune music, this is definitely a soundtrack you're going to find yourself listening to even outside the game. Video games are a unique amalgamation of a lot of different creative fields. Games can have great gameplay, story, music, and graphics. All of these elements are here in Cave Story. However, the interplay between all of these is what I believe makes Cave Story into an experience that's greater than the sum of its parts. Even though it was released 15 years ago, Cave Story is still an absolute marvel in the world of indie games. Today, there seems to be a resurgence in indie and retro-styled games, and I'd argue that Cave Story has played a huge part in that. It really did prove that one person can create a game that is on par, or even better than that of big studios, and it inspired others to chase that pipe dream in the process. For anyone with even a slight interest in video games, Cave Story is a must-play. The game has been remastered, remade, and been ported to pretty much every platform there is, some of which contain higher resolution graphics and remixed music. Personally, I recommend the original release of the game. It's free, and the original pixel art and music is absolutely timeless in my opinion, although the ports do a great job of keeping the style of the original game intact. I'll provide a link in the description to a tribute site that contains download links to the original freeware version of the game. It also has plenty of archived information about the fascinating history of Cave Story. So if you've never played it, give Cave Story a try. You won't regret it. Oh, and thank you all so much for watching. I just hit 100 subscribers, which is pretty awesome, so I hope you all stay safe and take care.